This lesson will be about properties and methods. Basically, we have an object, a range for example, and we can have a full stop operator here, followed by one or two things. It can either be a property in this case, or we can have a method. A property is something which an object has, and a method is something which you actually do to the object. Let me just do that in a bit more detail. I'll start Excel, and we'll put a usual design developer toolbar, and we will put a button on the screen, and I usually try and bring this down as small as possible, and I'll double click, and this gives us our code editor. So what I'll do, I'll just try this bit of code out and see what it does. If I run this code, it gives me a message box of the count of the number of cells in range A3. So what that means is that if I select the cell, if I show you the range here, A1 to A3, you can see that it's got 3 cells, and this is just one of the properties of the range, so it's the range object. So you might say, well, what is an object? And it's a bit circuitous, because an object has properties and methods. What's a property? A property is something that an object has, so I'm afraid it is a bit circular. The other, as I mentioned, thing that we have is is a method. So let me try out this bit of code here. So in this case, I'll just comment this bit out here like that, and now when I run it, what's it going to do? Can you predict? A1 to C2 it's going to select, so it's going to select that particular range of cells. So once again, we have a property. When we have the dot operator, then the two things which can follow it are the property and method, and a property is something which it has, and a method is something which you do to it. If you take a look as you're typing, if we press the full stop or the dot operator, you can see that IntelliSense brings down a series of, well, which is which. You have here the ones with the pointing finger are called properties, and the one which are with a looks like a flying green brick are the methods. And you can find the ones that you want here. If we start typing C, for example, then, well, there you are. You can clear the contents as well. You know that clear will clear everything, and clear contents will just clear the contents and not clear the formatting, for example. We can have a hierarchy of objects as well. What I mean, if we look at this particular statement, font bold equals true, and we can look at this one in a moment as well, cells font bold equals true. Let's just put that bit of code in our spreadsheet, and then just what does it do? Well, if I put a number in here and then I run the code, it simply makes it bold. Now let's take a look at it, because what we have is an object. As I mentioned before, this range is an object. We can have a hierarchy of objects, so we've got an object here and another object here. In fact, we could include the worksheets as well in here, worksheets, which it also is an object, sheet 1 I think. We will talk about that more later, about the worksheet object, but you see, if what I could just do for the moment is make that false, and that should unbold worksheets. I've left out the inverted comma, that's fine. So if I had to do that, it makes it unbold, you see. But just to emphasize that we've got an object here, and then another object belonging to that particular object, and so on. And this, we could say for the moment, is an object, and this is the property that it has. Well, that's all fairly straightforward, really. We could take a look at another version of this, and that's the using cells. So once again, we have an object hierarchy that this is the cells object, and then the font object. This is a property, and this is true. Now, I'm now going to confuse you, because what I've said is not entirely true. If you want to ignore what I'm going to say from now on, that's fine, and just think of that as being an object, and that indeed these are all objects. That's a property, and that's the value that the property has. Well, to confuse you, let me just go and look for let's go and look for help on this. So I'll double click on it and press F1, and it says here it's the property. Oh dear, it's a property which it says here that it returns a range object. What does that mean? Well, you could look at it to say that as it's typed, this word in the VBE, as you're typing in the code, it produces a range object, and that's why they call it a property. As I say, if you like to think of it as an object, that's fine by me. It's just when you come to look at it, you're going to find property written here, which is a bit confusing. But if you look carefully at here, it says the range object. So if I'll click on that, and that's what we're looking for, a range object. Well, a range object is returned by a range property, but it's also returned by a cells property, you see. So if I go and take a look here and then press F1 on that, you should find that you'll get, well, I'll do it, you get the cells property. But look here, it says the cells property returns a range object. Well, let's just click on the range object and see what we're trying to find. What are we trying to find? We're trying to find really the properties and methods of these things. Well, if you look down the bottom, now it's not always easy to find this stuff. I think Microsoft moves it around, and it's a confusing topic, but I think it's made even more confusing. But if we look at this down the bottom of the screen, we've got the range object members, and there you are. Now, at the end of the day, that's what you want. You want to know all of the properties and methods of the range object. So let's see what we can find here. And we can find the font object here. We go and get information from that. Well, that indeed itself is an interesting one. If we click on that, so, oh goodness gracious me, a property once again. Oh, here we are. It returns a font object. So once again, that's where you need to look if you want to know about the font. So if I click in there, and you can see the font object members, you can see that indeed it's got properties, but it doesn't have any methods by the look of it. So font, you can see font bold, you can take a look at that, and at the end of the day these examples are extremely helpful. And also at the end of the day, really, what are you trying to do? What do you want to be able to do? You want to be able to find the properties of the range object and the properties of cells. Well, if you want the properties of cells, you have to go looking under the properties of range. So that's what I'll do. Once again, I'll just press the F1 key. That gives me the range property, and if you look carefully, it'll tell you there the range object, and once you've got the range object, you can go down and find them at the bottom here, the property range object members. Okay, but also you could also just type a full stop after something. If you type a full stop, then it'll bring down all the properties and methods, so it's another way of finding them out. But let's try that for cells. If you do that for cells, oh dear, it doesn't work on cells. That's because you're supposed to know that cells produces a range object, and that's where you go looking for it. All a bit confusing. At the end of the day, if you want to just think of those as objects followed by a property, that's fine by me. We can just take a look at some other properties and methods as well as we find them. For example, if we want to find the try putting a formula into the cell. We'll just try it in B1 for the moment. So if we put a number in here, you can see that that will what it's going to do. It'll place a formula into that cell, just emphasizing that this formula is going to be another property of that cell, and it will actually put this bit of text in, which indeed is a formula. So let's just see what happens when I try it. It puts the actual formula into the cell. You see A1 multiplied by 2. You have to be very careful with the inverted commas here and write them precisely as it's typed there. So it simply multiplies that by 2 and puts the result into B1. If I were to, this might be useful if I tried B2. It's the range B1 to B2, and then so we'll need to have some values down here as well, and just move that out of the way a bit. And then when I run my code, B1 to B3, I'll make it for a change, B1 to B3, and then when I run that, it should multiply whatever's in here. Whatever's in there gets multiplied by 2. It's like the Excel drag down, really. So we can also read what's in the formula as well. So what's in that formula, let me just try it. If I bring this code in and then pick up what's in the formula, what's actually there. So we might message box the formula out as well, just to show that indeed the formula itself is considered to be a bit of text or a string. So if I click that, you see it should message box what's actually in the. What we could say is that this is a read-write property. We could either read it from the object or write the value to it. Other properties and methods, for example, if we try this, we have message box selection address. That means if I select something and then click the button, it should give me the address, and it gives me the address in absolute reference. That is to say, it's got the $ in it at the moment. If you want to change that, you can actually go to, let's get some help on that, on the address property of right now, and I'll just get help on that, and it's the address property. And you can see here that the help has got the address row absolute. What I'm going to do is to actually copy that. I find that very useful, just to copy it and just try put it into your code, and I'll just then you can see. I'll just make that a bit bigger so we can see it. I'll just get rid of that for the moment and see if I can look at that. Well, we don't need all of that. In fact, I can get rid of this stuff here, and what are we left with here? It's row absolute column. Well, what that means is that if I make that false and do the same thing for the column, let's just see the effect of that. You can see how it's very useful to cut and paste from the help itself. Let me just try that out. And we've got row absolute, column absolute. Looks like we've got just the address has been duplicated here. Okay, now so we need the comma in here, and that should fix it. Okay, and now if we try it, you'll see we've lost our $ here. Well, I haven't selected, so if I select this down here, for example, and then try it out, you can see I've lost the $. So that's another way of looking at the address. But the point I'm really making is this here, when we call these are assigned, the values which are assigned to this property using the colon equals operator. You have to remember that really. Okay. If we want to color a cell, I've got, for example, if we try this now, what does this say? Font, and take notice the American spelling of color here. Font color index range. Let's see what it does for a start. If we click the button, you'll just see it makes those red. You've got these are your values of the palette. So we could try value 5, and that should turn it blue, you see now. And another interesting one is if you want to return it to its original, it's got this strange. Sorry, it's got the. I'll just undo that. You want is it's got the rather strange value of Excel color index, which has got a value of minus 4,105 or something, but it's not just black. It's actually, when you think about it, it is indeed a grey color. So if I were to click that, these should go back to their normal, so to speak. As I say, it's rather a grey and not necessarily black.